Every story the NFL wants you to forget. Body bag game. Player safety. In November 1990, the Philadelphia Eagles hosted Washington at Veterans Stadium on Monday Night Football. What unfolded became known as the body bag game. Buddy Ryan's Eagles, led by the ferocious defensive front of Reggie White, Jerome Brown, and Seth Joyner, unleashed one of the most brutal beatdowns in league history. By the game's end, Washington had suffered 9 injuries, including 2 quarterbacks. The Eagles won 28-14, but the score was almost secondary to the carnage. Eagles players taunted their opponents, asking, "Who's coming out in a body bag next?" The nickname stuck instantly. For the NFL, the spectacle was both a ratings draw and a reputational problem. The game highlighted the violent, gladiatorial nature of pro football, the very thing that thrilled fans, but also worried critics, at a time when concerns about player safety were just beginning to grow. The optics of one team openly celebrating injuries to another painted the league as callous. The backlash forced the NFL to confront its own image. In the years that followed, the league began experimenting with stricter rules on roughing the passer, defenseless receivers, and hits to the head. While the body bag game didn't cause these reforms by itself, it became one of the most infamous examples cited whenever player safety entered the debate. Deflategate. Game integrity. In January 2015, the New England Patriots crushed the Indianapolis Colts in the AFC Championship game. But by the next morning, the story wasn't their victory. It was the footballs. Reports surfaced that the Patriots had used underinflated balls, making them easier to grip, throw, and catch in the cold, rainy conditions. What began as a quirky controversy quickly ballooned into one of the NFL's most infamous scandals. Deflategate. The league launched an investigation led by attorney Ted Wells, which concluded that quarterback Tom Brady was more likely than not aware of the scheme. The NFL handed down a sweeping punishment. Brady was suspended 4 games. The Patriots were fined $1 million, and the team forfeited 2 draft picks. The fallout consumed the league. For months, debates raged. Did deflated footballs really matter? Was Brady unfairly targeted? Was this about protecting the game or making an example out of his biggest star? The case went all the way to federal court, with Brady initially winning a reversal before the suspension was reinstated. For the NFL's image, the scandal was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it reinforced the idea that the league would punish even its most powerful players to uphold integrity. On the other, the drawn-out battle made the NFL look heavy-handed, inconsistent, and obsessed with optics. Critics said the league turned a minor equipment issue into a years-long circus, distracting from the sport itself. Though Brady went on to win more Super Bowls and cement his legacy, Deflategate left a mark. It fueled conspiracy theories, deepened distrust of Commissioner Roger Goodell, and added another scar to the Patriots dynasty. Bountygate. Player violence. In 2012, the NFL uncovered a scandal that shook its reputation for fairness and safety. Bountygate. The investigation revealed that from 2009 to 2011, members of the New Orleans Saints defensive unit had operated a bounty system. Players were paid cash bonuses for injuring opponents, with payouts for knockouts and card-offs. The scheme ran under defensive coordinator Greg Williams, and according to the league, head coach Sean Payton failed to stop it. The timing made it worse. The NFL was already facing mounting scrutiny over concussions and player safety. Now, the image of professional athletes deliberately targeting each other for profit played directly into the narrative that the league celebrated violence at the expense of its players' health. Commissioner Roger Goodell handed down some of the harshest discipline in league history. Williams was suspended indefinitely. Payton received a full season suspension, the first ever for an NFL head coach. General manager Mickey Loomis and assistant head coach Joe Vitt were also suspended, while the team was fined $500,000 and stripped of second-round draft picks in 2012 and 2013. Several players, including Jonathan Vilma, now a color analyst with Fox, were suspended, though their bans were later overturned on appeal. The scandal tarnished the Saints' 2009 Super Bowl championship run, raising the uncomfortable questions about how far the bounty culture extended. For the NFL, Bountygate was devastating to its credibility. The league had long promoted hard hits and highlight reels, but now it was forced to reconcile that celebration of violence with the public outcry for safety. Spygate. Game integrity. In 2007, the NFL was confronted with a scandal that cut to the heart of the game's integrity. The New England Patriots, led by head coach Bill Belichick, were caught illegally videotaping New York Jets defensive coaches as they signaled in plays from the sideline. The practice, long rumored, now had undeniable proof, and it carried the name that would last forever: Spygate. The NFL moved quickly. Belichick was fined $500,000, the Patriots organization another $250,000, and the team was stripped of its 2008 first-round draft pick. It was the harshest punishment ever levied against a head coach, but for many, it wasn't enough. The fallout cast a shadow over the Patriots dynasty. New England had already won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, but suddenly, every victory came under suspicion. Fans, rivals, and media questioned, were the Patriots' titles tainted? How much of their dominance was due to an unfair edge? For the NFL, the scandal was a reputational wound. The league has always prided itself on competitive balance and fair play, yet here was one of its greatest teams caught crossing the line. The story dominated headlines, feeding conspiracy theories and sowing distrust. Even years later, opponents would invoke Spygate when facing the Patriots, and critics argued the punishment hadn't matched the crime. Belichick and Tom Brady went on to win more championships, proving the Patriots' greatness went beyond stolen signals. But the damage to perception never fully faded. Spygate became shorthand for cheating in football, a scar on the league's image, and a reminder that in the NFL, even greatness could be questioned. The overall impact of Spygate was that the NFL's competition committee finally approved extending helmet communication to the defenses starting in the 2008 season, 14 years after the offenses had already been using it. Michael Vick, dogfighting. In the summer of 2007, Michael Vick, the Atlanta Falcons superstar quarterback, was indicted on federal charges for financing and running an illegal dogfighting operation known as Bad News Kennels. At the time, Vick was one of the most recognizable athletes in America, a former #1 overall draft pick, the league's most dynamic quarterback, and the face of the Falcons franchise. The details of the case were shocking. Investigators described dogs being beaten, drowned, electrocuted, and even executed after losing fights. The cruelty captured public attention in a way few sports scandals ever had. Unlike performance-enhancing drug cases or gambling controversies, this was not confined to football. It was visceral, disturbing, and morally indefensible. Vick was suspended indefinitely by Commissioner Roger Goodell and later sentenced to 23 months in federal prison. His $130 million contract with Atlanta, then the richest in league history, was voided, leaving the franchise in disarray. Sponsors such as Nike, Rawlings, and Coca-Cola cut ties. Fans burned jerseys. The NFL, already navigating criticism over violence on the field, now faced an off-field crisis that made headlines around the world. For the league's reputation, the scandal was devastating. Vick wasn't a journeyman or a fringe player. He was one of the NFL's most marketable stars. His downfall called into question how much the league really knew about his players' lives and whether it was willing to hold its icons accountable. The case also amplified debates about character, role models, and the responsibility of athletes in the public eye. Aaron Hernandez, murder. At the University of Florida, Aaron Hernandez was both a prodigy and a problem, a national champion, a John Mackey Award winner, and a matchup nightmare on the field. He seemed destined for NFL stardom. But behind the highlight reels, troubling signs flashed early. In 2007, as a freshman, Hernandez was involved in a Gainesville bar fight that left a manager with a ruptured eardrum. Police reports linked him, but the incident was quietly resolved. Months later, his name surfaced in a drive-by shooting that left 2 men wounded. Again, no charges. Coaches described him as temperamental, prone to violent outbursts, and failing drug tests that were handled internally. But Florida football kept moving forward. By 2010, NFL teams knew the risk. Concerns about maturity and behavior sent Hernandez sliding to the 4th round, where the New England Patriots, a franchise built on discipline and winning, saw opportunity. Pairing him with Rob Gronkowski, the Patriots unleashed a 2 tight end offense that rewrote playbooks. On the field, Hernandez was electric. Off it, the same shadows followed. Reports of altercations, reckless behavior, and troubling associations never fully went away. Then came June 2013. Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional player and associate of Hernandez, was found murdered near Hernandez's home. The investigation unfolded like a crime drama. Surveillance footage, text messages, shell casings, all tying Hernandez to the killing. Days later, he was arrested and charged with murder. The Patriots cut him that same morning. The trial stretched on for nearly 3 months, each headline chipping away at the NFL's image. Once hailed as a rising star, Hernandez was convicted of murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Behind bars, his violent past came back into focus, including allegations linking him to a 2012 double homicide. Then in 2017, at just 27 years old, Hernandez was found dead by suicide in his prison cell. A tragic final chapter to a story of wasted talent, ignored warning signs, and a league left to reckon with its own blind spots. Colin Kaepernick, blackballing. In 2016, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick began kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality and racial injustice. What began as a quiet personal act of conscience quickly became a cultural firestorm. Supporters praised his courage, while critics, including political leaders, condemned him as unpatriotic. On the field, Kaepernick's career unraveled. After opting out of his contract in 2017, no NFL team signed him, despite his clear talent and experience leading a team to the Super Bowl just 4 years earlier. Many believed he had been blackballed by owners, wary of controversy. Though the league denied collusion, Kaepernick later settled a grievance with the NFL, fueling the perception that the league had effectively exiled him. The reputational damage was enormous. For younger fans, players, and activists, the NFL looked hypocritical, profiting off black athletes while silencing one who spoke out against injustice. The league was accused of valuing image and corporate sponsors over free expression and social responsibility. Sponsors, fans, and even politicians took sides, placing the NFL at the heart of America's cultural divide. Stadiums became battlegrounds for debates about race, patriotism, and protest. The optic of Kaepernick's exclusion, especially as lesser quarterbacks found jobs, further cemented the perception of collusion. By 2020, after the killing of George Floyd and the global wave of protests, Commissioner Roger Goodell publicly admitted the league had mishandled player protests. The NFL pledged to support social justice causes, but for many, the damage was already done. Kaepernick never returned to the field, and his absence became as symbolic as his protest. Ray Rice, domestic violence. In February 2014, security footage from an Atlantic casino elevator captured an image of Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice punching his fiancée, rendering her unconscious. After a full investigation by the NFL, the league handed down a 2-game suspension to Rice. 8 months later, the full video of the assault was released by TMZ. The sheer brutality of the attack caused major uproar by fans, advocacy groups, and politicians alike to the tone-deaf response the league had taken. After all, suspensions for marijuana and performance-enhancing drugs were considered far more serious crimes and given longer suspensions than this had warranted. The fallout from the video being released was swift. The Ravens immediately cut Rice, and the NFL suspended him indefinitely. More importantly, the league was forced to confront its policies. Goodell admitted the punishment had been mishandled and announced a new baseline suspension of 6 games for a first domestic violence offense, with the lifetime ban for a second offense. This became the cornerstone of a revised personal conduct policy, which broadened the commissioner's authority and mandated education, counseling, and resources for players and families. The NFL launched partnerships with groups like No More and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, but the damage to the league's reputation had already been done. CTE, concussions. For decades, football was sold as the ultimate test of toughness. Players were glorified for shaking off hits, returning to the huddle, and playing through pain. But beneath the spectacle, a devastating truth was taking shape, one that would spark the NFL's greatest scandal: chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. The story began quietly in the 1990s, when former players like Mike Webster, the legendary Pittsburgh Steelers center, began to deteriorate mentally and physically long after retirement. Webster suffered from depression, dementia-like symptoms, and homelessness before his death in 2002. Dr. Bennett Omalu, a forensic pathologist, studied Webster's brain and discovered alarming evidence. Repeated head trauma had left behind abnormal tau protein buildup, scarring the brain in ways eerily similar to Alzheimer's. He called it CTE. Omalu published his findings, but instead of embracing the research, the NFL fought back. League doctors publicly discredited his work, dismissing it as flawed. For years, the NFL downplayed the risks of concussions, even as players like Junior Seau, Dave Dworson, and Andre Waters died by suicide, their brains later showing signs of severe CTE. The scandal exploded into the public eye in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Lawsuits piled up from thousands of former players and their families. A class action settlement eventually forced the NFL to pay out over $1 billion for medical claims related to brain injuries. The 2015 film Concussion, starring Will Smith as Omalu, brought the issue into pop culture, painting the league as a powerful institution more concerned with profits than player health. The reputational damage was immense. For the first time, fans, parents, and young athletes questioned whether football was too dangerous to play. Youth participation dropped. High schools and colleges faced scrutiny. The NFL, once untouchable, was cast as an industry that had ignored science to protect its image. In response, the league scrambled to adapt. It introduced concussion protocols, independent neurologists, stricter return-to-play rules, and banned head-first hits. The NFL invested millions into helmet research and pledged to study brain injuries more transparently. Commercials shifted focus from big hits to player safety. Yet critics argue the changes came only after years of denial. Today, CTE remains football's darkest shadow. Each new study, each retired player's story keeps the spotlight on the risks of the game. While the NFL survives and thrives financially, the scandal reshaped its identity. It forced the league to admit that behind the glory and tradition lies a dangerous truth. Football can change lives, but it can also destroy them. The CTE saga is more than a scandal. It's a reckoning. For the NFL, it meant confronting not just what happens on Sundays, but what happens years later, in the silence of hospital rooms, in broken families, and in the fading memories of the men who once gave everything to the game.